This is The Trend, where you'll be getting an enlightened perspective of trending news and topics with amazing commentary. And today's episode is going to be very interesting as we're going to be talking about mass shooting, gun violence, gun control, and all that stuff. It's been a huge topic as of late on media, social media, and for me, I wanted to do my due diligence and really dive into the facts and potential ways of thinking in terms of guns, how they're portrayed in society and media, and the actual facts on how they're used throughout the entire world and history. I'm going to be looking at it from three different perspectives in today's episode. As you guys can see, I'm here by myself. So definitely appreciate everybody there. If you're listening, to rate me 5 stars on the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all that stuff. Tell your friends, tell your family, as we're here with daily content on the YouTube channel, as well as weekly content on the podcast. Lots of things to talk about, and that is what I'm here to do. And today we don't got a guest either, so I have a picture of some gun control picture that you guys can enjoy, of course. So, like I said, I'm going to be diving into this with three different perspectives. The first perspective is focusing on the personal level, so to speak, the interpersonal level, on the perception of gun control for the people within the country itself. Then we're going to expand the perspective a little bit more and look at gun control and guns on a global scale in terms of other countries and how they compare, because a lot of people like to compare gun control from other countries and say, oh, this works here, etc., etc. So we're going to take a little bit of a step back and look at it a little bit deeper. And then the third perspective is we're going to look at it in a more historical situation, look at the reasoning why the Second Amendment was implemented for the United States and what history really tells us in terms of gun control. So, for starters, of course, we're going to be starting off with the personal perspective, and for good reason, because a lot of situations have been happening as of recently in terms of mass shootings. I think mass shooting is what is truly propelling it, because when people think of gun control, the main reason why they're saying that this needs to be the case is due to mass shootings. So as of last weekend, it seems like there's been a lot of news and social media news of mass shootings, and it makes me question on, is there an agenda on why so much social media news is covering mass shootings? Now, this is a little bit of kind of my deeper thinking in terms of what is going on, because we know that in terms of gun control, Joe Biden is a president that is indicating that we need more gun control. He has some policies put in place, such as raising the age that is required to obtain a gun, banning certain types of guns, and more checks in terms of people requiring or acquiring a gun, right? So this is very important for his presidency and his election. So the news covering the mass shootings makes me think that there's a bigger agenda than the people who are dying, but more as a focus on those happening. So, someone like Joe Biden can get more favor since he is all for gun control, and a lot of people are also for gun control. It seems very deliberate, is what I'm saying, considering the increased amount of news regarding mass shootings specifically. I'm just saying, I'm not Democratic, I'm not Republican, I'm not conservative, I'm not liberal, but I understand how this stuff works. And when I think something is off, when I think something doesn't really make sense, I'm going to call it out. Now, as I said, as of last weekend, there has been 12 people confirmed dead in terms of the mass shootings that have been happening. Although not a huge number, it's still unfortunate for the people who have passed away. In terms of 2022, 39 confirmed deaths have happened in terms of mass shootings. Again, not a large number considering we're in the month of June, but 39 people losing their life due to this unfortunate circumstances should still be respected, right? Although it's only 39 people in terms of the totality of deaths in 2021, right? So I want you guys to kind of get a little bit of a statistic. So mass shootings are very noted, right? They're very shown in front of the media. It's the easiest way for people to hate guns due to mass shootings. from 1982 to 2022, there's only have been 1,039 people have died from mass shootings. So, from all the millions and millions and millions and millions of people, only 1,039 people have died from mass shootings. I just want people to put things in perspective in terms of why these narratives are being pushed, because it's not that where it's a crisis on so many people are losing their lives in terms of percentage. It definitely seems more deeper than that. Our worst year, however, was 2018. Now, one thing I will point out for everybody listening is that it's not something that it's getting better. Actually, it is getting worse. It peaked at 2018 where there was a lot of mass shootings at that period. Now, it has decreased from 2018, and obviously 2020, it was at like an all-time low, partially due to everybody staying in the house because of COVID-19. And the numbers right now, still relatively low, definitely lower from 2018, but still relatively higher than the average of the last 2000s in general and 2010s, right? So regardless, we still need to work our way from keeping mass shootings from rising further in the future. Now, I do want to dive into some more things for you guys here in terms of deaths in America, right? Now, these statistics are from 2020 because it's hard to kind of consolidate a lot of statistics. It takes a lot of time. But I want to kind of put things in perspective for a lot of people who are listening, just so people can understand the impact of mass shootings and what its true impact is on American society. So in terms of 2020, 3,383,729 people have died in that year. The leading cause of death in 2020 was heart disease, with 696,000 people. Second was cancer. Third was COVID. Fourth was accidents, then strokes, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, influenza, and all those. So those are some of the leading causes, and they're in the hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands of deaths in 2020. Keep in mind, I'm talking about 2020. So you could see that in terms of those are very high numbers, and they definitely show the proportion. Now, I will want to point out something for everybody here, that with those things that I've just told you, there's really not a focus in terms of heart disease, because heart disease and diabetes is very intertwined with the current health habits of Americans, but it's not really talked about much because it really won't sell well with Americans because they don't want to be told that they can't eat. Matter of fact, the movement that is being pushed more is being unhealthy, being overweight is more of a accepted narrative. So it wouldn't help for them to push something like heart disease or diabetes to people, right? I'm just saying, think about it logically. Think about what the media is trying to do and what they are actually trying to push. Now, one of the other leading causes of deaths is suicide. And the reason why I mentioned suicide is it's because it's very important, because this is a primary attributor to the worst situation for people in America is mental illness, right? Mental illness is a big problem for America. But again, it's not talked about nearly enough in terms of people taking their own life. Matter of fact, in 2020, there has been 1.2 million suicide attempts. And these are not numbers that I'm just pulling out of my ass. No, these are numbers you can look up that are in databases. 1.2 million people have attempted suicide. 45,979 people have died from suicide. So that is an important statistic, because that indicates how detrimental people are having it in terms of their mental illness. So the reason why we keep on bringing up mental illness for mass shootings is because it's important. It's important because of the declining health of people in America. But people in the media and people even on the Democratic side, because I reacted to a video of Trevor Noah and he was trying to debunk the gun advocate side. And he's mentioned a lot of things that was very weird in my opinion, because he never mentioned the main things that I've heard from gun advocates, which is mental illness being the primary one. But he didn't talk about it. Media outlets don't talk about it. Matter of fact, they act like it's a no big deal at all. The important thing to consider here is that mental illness is a big problem, but it's purely not addressed. But I want to put things in another light, of course, because at the end of the day, over 50% of the suicide deaths are done using a gun. Now, this is not a time to celebrate because, see, yeah, guns are really bad. No, again, use your brain, use some logic, because 47% of the people are actually doing it without a gun. Meaning, if they don't have a gun, they will use an alternative means to commit suicide. Regardless, my notion or the thing that I'm trying to portray to you guys people is that mental illness is a big, big problem. Now, the amount of deaths in 2020 that was due to a mass shooting, do you know how much deaths there were? 9. 9 people died from mass shootings in 2020. Out of 3,383,729 people who have died in 2020, 9 of them was due to a mass shooting. 45,979 people died to suicide. But what do we want to focus on? Mass shootings. I'm telling you, it's done purposely for a reason. Now, I do want to push back against, guns are not a bad thing, right? Because, like I said, I'm moderate, I'm neutral. Because one negative thing in terms of guns currently in our society is now they are the leading cause of death in children. The former leading cause of death was actually automobiles, but we never said that automobiles was the horrible thing, but we did do our best to make sure automobiles are as safe as possible for children. We've done so many safety checks. We made sure drunk drivers are not drinking while they're driving. We made sure that the seatbelts are as safe as possible, the cars are as safe as possible, multiple security measures. Matter of fact, there was a quote that said, we can do the same thing with firearms in regards to automobiles and how they decrease that number and in reference to firearms. One of the people said, we can do the same thing with firearms. We just haven't been able to do that in the same amount of years yet. He said it takes time to figure out what the underlying issues are with the problem and then finding the solutions. So their mindset, for the people who were able to fix this issue, their mindset was, oh, we should just take away all the cars. Nobody should be driving anymore. No, their solutions were vastly different and dependent on each scenario. And that's what we need to do with firearms and see why this is an issue with young children. And one of the big reasons, as I said, is mental illness. Now, we do need to find different ways to improve the system to make sure that these children do not acquire these type of weaponry, and we'll dive into that a little bit later. Now, in terms of the age groups of people who die due to their and I want to keep in mind, when I'm talking about firearms, this is not just mass shooting. These are just all gun-related deaths. As I said, there's most of them, in terms of firearm deaths, the most types of deaths due to firearms, stay with me right here. I know this may be surprising. It is suicide. Matter of fact, 65% of gun-related deaths are attributed to suicide. So, again, you're trying to tell me mental illness is not a part of it, and that is bullcrap. Anybody who tries to argue with the facts and numbers are just lying, or just being, just trying to be different, right? Now, 30% are homicides, and 2% come from accidental discharges. So situations where it's an accident, someone dies. For children, though, this is where it's definitely worse for children. So those are all deaths. Those are deaths are revolving around adults. Sorry, I should have specified that. I'm reading the statistics while I'm talking. Hey, I'm kind of a newbie in the podcast scene. Sorry about that. But in terms of adults, 65% in terms of suicide, 30% in terms of homicide. 65% of deaths for children are homicide, and 35% is suicide. So there's definitely a mental health issue regardless of the situation. But there is something we need to do to make sure that these children are not, dying, making it the leading cause. And like the person said, we got to look at all the problems and find solutions for all the problems going on in the world. Now, do keep in mind, in terms of the age groups, Under the age of 19 is the second lowest age group of deaths. So it's not like it's the leading cause. It's right above people over 65, and it's way below a bunch of other age groups. And I'm not trying to kind of mitigate the problem here. As I said, we need to find solutions for this. We don't want kids to be dying due to firearms. We don't want 65% of firearm deaths to be homicides in regards to children. There's a bigger issue. Now, I've already broken down, it's not mass shootings, but there is a bigger issue, and that needs to be resolved, of course. Now I want to talk about a little something else that people kind of bring up in terms of gun deaths, right? And one of the things that people like to bring up in terms of gun deaths is the type of guns. A lot of people, again, attributed to mass shootings, like to blame assault weapons for a lot of the things that happen in our society, right? Now, listen to the statistics, right? In terms of the type of guns that lead to unfortunate deaths, 59% are handguns. So people are trying to pass laws to ban assault weapons, right? People are trying to blame assault weapons. People are trying to be very mad at assault weapons for all these deaths going on. Even though, again, I broke down the percentage of mass shootings not being nearly as prevalent as people like to try to say. But regardless, assault weapon percentage of deaths is 3%. 3% of all gun deaths are assault weapons. People, do not let people manipulate you with narratives. Do not let people manipulate you with false titles, topics, and news coverage. All you have to do is do your own due diligence and research. And I'm not going to blame people for buying into all this coverage about it when it's in your face 24/7, with a lot of people who are uneducated and ignorant talking about it on social media, with a lot of people who are on the news outlet just doing it for an agenda, constantly put in your face. I don't blame you, because not everybody wants to go out and research their own thing. They got things that they want to focus on more so, whether it's the entertainment that they kind of indulge in, whether it's their social life, whether it's their personal life, whether it's their romantic life or their work life. There's a lot of things to probably want to focus on more so than anything else. That's why people like me need to step up, who want to take the opportunity to kind of portray all this news and information to you. People need to step up and do it as much as possible, so people are not oversaturated with the wrong information and just people trying to push an agenda in front of you. Like I said, I am not Democrat, I'm not Republican, I'm not liberal, I'm not conservative. All I care about is the facts, and I only care about the feelings about 25% of the time. You feel me? So with that said, 3% of the assault weapons are firearm deaths. Assault weapons are only 3% of firearm deaths. Shotguns are 1%, and then the rest of the percentage are unidentified, weaponry, right? So as you guys can see, in terms of the types of guns, the biggest one is handguns, and as we dived into it, most of that is due to suicide deaths, unfortunately. Because when people commit suicide, most of the time, a good like 90% of the time, that's just a general estimate, it's with a handgun, not with an assault weapon. So even that 59% that you're looking at, a lot of that is handgun suicide deaths, unfortunately. Now, another thing I want to talk about. So we talked about a few things here in terms of mass shooting and the percentage being way emphasized, over dramatized in terms of the amount of deaths that actually happen in America, period. So mass shootings is not nearly as big as a problem as the mental illness issue that people constantly be putting in your face, because there are way more serious things going on in terms of suicide. So I went over a lot of different things for you guys here today, and I'm going to dive into one more topic, but just kind of reiterate a lot of the points that we already discussed. As in terms of mass shootings, it's definitely over dramatized. There's a lot of worse things that are going on in terms of people's deaths that are nearly not focused nearly as much. Mental illness is a very big part of mass shootings, as well as other deaths, as we talked about, considering how much the suicide deaths are in America, being one of the leading causes of deaths in America, of course, and it's not getting any better with our current society. So that definitely needs to be addressed. There are plenty of firearm deaths in general, though. So I dove into mass shooting deaths, but in terms of firearm deaths in general, including suicides, from the statistics that I gathered, it was about 45,222 firearm-related deaths from that specific year. So I'm not acting like the firearms are not contributing to a large amount of deaths, but I will say that there's a lot more nuance to it that people are trying to kind of portray to people. A good chunk of it, about half of it, is suicide, and the other small percentage, a very, very small percentage, is mass shooting, and the other percentage definitely is way deeper in terms of day-to-day deaths and trying to figure out why that is happening. That is the big focus, why those day-to-day deaths are happening. And a lot of that is due to certain cultures and certain communities, and that is undeniable, and we got to fix that, as it is a definite issue in our current society, fixing that type of culture, fixing the that type of situation, right? So the last thing I want to discuss in terms of the personal level within our country is legal versus illegal weaponry, and the amount of the unrealization, I don't even know if that's the proper term, but there's, for some reason, people don't realize that even if you ban guns to a certain extent, people can get it illegally. So I looked up information on trying to figure out how much weaponry is used in crimes with illegal firearms, and it's really hard to kind of narrow down. However, there was a survey in 2004, and keep in mind, this, some people may not know this, but Congress years ago has stopped using federal taxpayers' dollars to fund gun-related research. And 2004 was the earliest gun survey in regards to illegal and legal firearms. Very strange, in my opinion. I'm curious why that is the case, but this will give you a good idea on the main point of what I'm going to tell you. So they did a survey in 13 states with the fewest restrictions on gun ownership, right? So the fewest restrictions. So that means that these are the states that people are able to get guns the best, right? These states, they have the least amount of resistance to get guns. Fewest restrictions. 40% of inmates, also this is a survey done with inmates, prisoners who've been guilty of gun-related crimes. 40% of inmates illegally obtained the gun they used. Only about 13% purchased the gun from a store or pawn shop. In the other 37 states, including New York State, 60% of inmates illegally procured, sorry with the vocabulary, the gun they used. About 48% of state prison inmates surveyed said they got the gun they used from a family member, friend, gun store, pawn shop, flea market, or gun show. So take out the gun shop, pawn shop, flea market, or gun show. You are not able to track getting a gun from a family member or a friend. So you stopping that is nearly impossible. Keep on going. Most states only require a background check if the purchase happens at a gun store. So only a gun store requires a background check. Unfortunately, the situations with a pawn shop, flea market, gun show, getting it from a friend, getting it from a family member is not addressed. There's nothing you can do about that as a government, because a lot of these are private events and privately owned stores. Gun stores, I believe, are a lot more state recognized. So only the gun stores require background checks. I do think there's potentially more we can do with that, but we'll talk about that and more in a second. And to go with the statistics a little bit more, 40% of state prison inmates admitted they obtained a gun illegally on the black market from a drug dealer or by stealing it. So I elicited a lot of statistics in front of you for a reason. As it said, 40% obtained an illegal firearm in the 13 fewest restricted states. These states made it as easy as possible for you to obtain a gun, and people still were illegally obtaining guns. In terms of the other states, in terms of the 40% of inmates just in general obtaining guns illegally on black market, even the 48% that have gotten it somewhat legally, some of them got it from their friend or family member. So people need to realize it's not as simple as, okay, let's add more background checks, because a lot of these people, almost 50%, like these statistics are close to 50%. That means almost half of the people that do gun related crimes don't have it legally. Sure, this is a survey done in 2004, but do you think it got any better since 2004? Do you think these people realize, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore and just buy my gun legally? No! A lot of these people who are doing criminal actions don't care about getting their guns legally. Why would they? Why would they want a registered gun to their name if they're doing an illegal crime? Use your head. Use some logic. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these crimes are done for people that are criminal. Or if they're not criminals, they're mentally ill. And I went through all the percentages, but there's so many factors into these situations that people just do not consider. And that is what I'm here to kind of enlighten you guys about. Hopefully you guys can learn something from what I'm telling you. Now, that is the first perspective in terms of the country itself and the statistics and facts that I'm telling you, right? But we're going to take a step back and a little bit look at it a little bit more globally to kind of compare it to other countries, because people say a lot of stuff that's misrepresented within our country itself. But then people, what they also do is they try to compare our country to other countries with their gun laws, gun control, and all that stuff. So in this second part, we're going to dive into gun control and how it works at a global scale. And some of the information I found pretty interesting in terms of guns and whatnot. Now, in terms of the global scale, one thing that is noteworthy in terms of America is the gun death rate is about 10.6, which is 20th in the world. So obviously not around the top, but still not good, because it definitely is higher than some of the other more developed countries in the world in general. So we definitely have not a gun problem, but we definitely have, definitely are not, and compared to our developed countries, you can say we have somewhat of a gun problem. But is that attributed more to the guns themselves or the people within the country and the melting pot that is the United States, and a lot of things that we're doing currently in our world that is causing a lot of issues in terms of mental illness and certain cultures that is incentivizing and not embracing, but definitely not embracing violence, so to speak. Now, let's dive into it a little bit deeper. So even though we are 10.6 in terms of gun death rate, and keep in mind these death rates are a percentage of 100,000 people. So this is all pertaining to 100,000 people when we talk about these rates of death, right? In terms of general death rate, which is 1,027 people per 100,000 in America, that death rate globally is around the 60s. And there's some countries that it's actually below in terms of general death rate. And you know what those countries are? Sweden, UK, France, Japan, Finland. Some of the countries that people like to compare us to, right? Saying that these countries have more gun control and whatnot, and they have all this, and that, but their death rates are higher than the United States. So on general, more people die on average in those countries than they do in the United States of America. But people don't take that into consideration, do they? These are supposed to be some of the countries that everybody look towards. Now, one of the key countries that everybody looks towards is Canada, by the way. Well, Canada is such a weird one, but they're going in a very weird direction in terms of a lot of the laws they've been implemented recently. And I don't know if it's a good thing for the country moving forward, but who really knows? Now, in terms of the gun control policies, now there's 3 different levels of gun control policies that a lot of countries are put under in terms of a kind of a metric or category, right? So in terms of the different levels of gun control, there's permissive gun laws, which is what America has, which is basically, it means that authorities give out licenses on a shall issue basis to anyone that meets the legal requirements of the countries. So these are countries that give out, gun licenses for people who, follow all the rules that they're supposed to, right? We have gun control laws currently already, and different gun controls that laws are implemented state by state. But for the most part, we're known as a permissive country in terms of gun control. So people act like we don't have gun control, period. That is just not true. I mean, for example, if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to possess a gun. So all those convicted felons, what they do is they get an illegal gun, but nobody talks about that. I know, right? Crazy. But anyway, so permissive gun laws, this is what the United States has, right? Another country that also has a permissive gun law? Austria. Probably another country that people compare the United States to. Austria also has permissive gun laws. And you know what else about Austria that's very interesting? It is 6 on the World Peace Index. So it has similar gun laws than us, but where they rank on the World Peace Index is 6. So that definitely means that the gun laws that we have in general, similar to Austria, is not the reason why our ranking is not that high, right? It must be more than that in terms of the United States. I'm just saying. Now, there's another level. We'll go down one level. It's called restrictive gun laws. So these are places like Canada. So Canada has a restrictive gun laws, right? And a country that also has a restrictive gun law is Argentina. Argentina has restrictive gun laws like Canada. These are gun laws that is way more restricted to the people who can obtain gun licenses. And Argentina, you know what's interesting? As I said, America is 20th in the world in terms of gun death rate. Argentina is 18th. They are 18th in gun death rate, but their laws are more restrictive than ours. Again, it seems like there's more factors than just guns. But let's talk about the last level, strict gun laws, where it's almost impossible to obtain a gun, period. Just period. You know what type of countries have strict gun laws? North Korea and China. Do people want to be North Korea and China? That's what's going on? Is that what the type of country that you want for the United States of America? A dictatorship in North Korea? Pretty much close to a dictatorship in China? There's so many restrictions on the people in general. And there's a reason why there's strict gun laws. So they can't fight back. And we'll dive into that more when we dive into the history segment. Well, let's look at some interesting statistics. Like I said, mass shooting seems like the go-to statistic or go-to thing that people use to try to say we should not have guns. The go-to thing, right? Now, there are some statistics out there, and these statistics are from 2009-2015. These are the average annual death rate per millions of people from mass public shootings. Okay? Number 1, Norway. 2, Serbia. 3, France. 4, Macedonia. 5, Albania. 6, Slovakia. 7, Switzerland. 8, Finland. 9, Belgium. 10, Czech Republic. 11th, United States. Right below us is Austria, and not too far from us is Canada, England, Germany, and Italy, and the Netherlands. So mass shootings is such a big statistics, but there are so many Scandinavian countries with an annual death rate for mass shootings that are either higher than the United States or very close to the United States. But nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. There's way more detailed statistics in terms of mass shootings, and people will be surprised that in terms of, if you really look at that data, the United States really, in terms, does not rank as highly as people suspect. Now, this is from 2009 to 2015, so a lot has changed from then, and it hasn't been getting better for the United States, especially 2018. That was like the worst year for the United States in terms of mass shootings. But again, my point is that there are statistics, there are things that are said that is not true or overblown or over dramatized, right? So that is looking at it at a global scale. As you realize that a lot of these situations in terms of comparing this to other countries is not as accurate and not as one-to-one as people like to say. There are several factors that go into a lot of these situations. And people need to recognize when you compare us to some places like Canada, to Finland, and a lot of these other countries, all of these other countries not only have a smaller population, what makes it easier to, create a certain type of society, but also they have less diversity, which also is a big factor in terms of different countries not getting along, and different types of laws that they put out other than gun control. So their standard of living is different, the way they handle criminals is different, but people don't take that into consideration. Even compare us to Canada, right? I looked up the statistics for Canada. Even though Canada has like a very low death rate and all that stuff, and it's pretty decent in the World Peace Index, I'm going to look at it from the point of view as a black person. In Canada, only like 5% of people in Canada is black. 5%. 5%. So the amount of diversity people really saying in there is really not there. A large percentage is white. More people, the percentage of white people in Canada is more than the percentage of white people in the United States of America. But again, people don't take that into consideration. Why did I mention that? Because the diversity impact of the United States is very intertwined with a lot of things that happen in the United States. I'm all for diversity, but let's recognize that these different cultures and the clash between these ideologies does cause social issues. It just does. It really does. Not blaming diversity for these deaths, but I'm putting things in perspective that there's way more to these situations than just guns and gun control laws. Okay? So, the final segment we're going to dive into today is looking at the historical significance of gun control and the purpose behind gun control. Like I said, I've heard a lot of reasoning behind why the Second Amendment is important, why guns are important. It's kind of crazy that people don't really understand why the Second Amendment was put in place in the first place. Matter of fact, if you look into history, one explanation why the most murderous governments and despots in the last 150 years, one of the things that they do constantly, limit gun ownership, and in some cases, take their guns altogether. Matter of fact, let's relate this to the beginning of the United States of America, the beginning of our country. King George of England attempted to implement gun confiscation policies in the colonies before the Revolutionary War. We all know that didn't work. The king's intent to disarm American colonists was one of the foundational reasons for our founding fathers adopting the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Right there, right then, is the reason why the Second Amendment exists. And so a governmental power is challenged. Because one of the things that these despots, these murderous governments, these dictators don't want is the people in their country to resist. Because resistance, the moment resistance happens within the country, it slows down the strategy or plan of that potential dictator. And also buys enough time for other countries to potentially get involved. Or buys enough time for the countries or the people themselves to strategize to take over the government and fight back, prolonging a conquest of a tyrannical rule, because we know tyranny is horrible. Now, that is not it, though. You thought that is it? You thought that was the only example of a situation where a tyrannical ruler wanted to take over its people with gun policies? No, there is so many more examples. And I was going to dive into the many examples of millions of deaths throughout the history of humans due to these gun control policies. But instead of me doing it, I reacted to a video of a gentleman who's going over gun control and the reason why it exists. And he went over it and beautifully, so I'll let him talk about it right now.
Only tyrannical regimes disarm their populations, and when they do, those governments inflict terrible control, violence, and killing onto their now disarmed populations. For example, in 1911, Turkey established gun control, and then from 1915 to 1917, 1.5 million Armenians, now unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. And in 1929, the Soviet Union established gun control. Then from 1929 to 1953, 20 million people, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. What do you mean, exterminated? Murdered. Oh, well, Those are just two examples. And China established gun control in 1935. Then from 1948 to 1952, 20 million political dissidents unable to defend themselves were rounded up and killed. Oh, and the people in China still exist under a brutal regime today. Oh, wait a minute. Germany also established gun control in 1938. And then from 1939 to 1945, 13 million Jews and others who were unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. I wonder if Hitler purposely disarmed the population so he could tyrannically take over and kill all people opposed to him. It's probably just a coincidence. But also Cambodia established gun control in 1956. Then from 1975 to 1977, 1 million educated people were rounded up and killed because they were unable to defend themselves. Is my shirt on straight? Yep, good. And Guatemala established gun control in 1964. Then from 1964 to 1981, 100,000 Mayan Indians unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. Oh, and it's probably not significant, but Uganda established gun control in 1970. Then from 1971 to 1979, 300,000 Christians unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. 56 million people rounded up and exterminated in the 20th century because of gun control? Yeah, apparently.
There you go. You heard the numerous amount of examples. You can look up these examples yourself. You heard the statistic that was brought out, the millions beyond millions of people who died as a result of what happened. And we're not saying that in terms of the United States government that they're trying to take over the country, even though they might. But we're not saying that it is something that is only here because our country is eventually going to take over its people. No. What we're saying is it's good to have these checks and balances. The purpose of the United States and why it's been one of, if not the most successful, arguable country empire in history is because of all the checks and balances that was put on the government to prevent tyrannical rule, to prevent as much corruption as possible, to prevent destruction within its people. These checks and balances are put there within the governmental system itself, within the state governments themselves, and with the citizens here as well. There are so many levels that people have to go by if they really want to take over this country and become a dictatorship. But we won't allow it, and there's a reason for that. Here's another example for you to think of it, because it's something that you always need to have, right? You need to have a way just in case. It's one of those just in case scenarios. It's like insurance. You're not expecting your car to crash, but you have insurance there just in case it does. We don't want, if the moment that our government tries to take over its people and we don't have any means to protect ourselves, it's over for every citizen in America. There's no going back. It's too late. All your kids from moving forward from then, it's gone. It's done. America is through, right? And people make the argument saying, "Oh, yeah, you're acting like the military if they wanted to fight back, that your guns would be able to stop them." That's not the point. And regardless, think about this, because that's such a dumb thing to say. Think about this. You rather be unarmed than armed? Really? Sure, a guy who has a tank in front of me, if I have just a rifle, then I'm not going to fare well. But I guarantee I have a better chance of faring than someone who has no weapon at all. Guarantee that. And another way to think about it is nuclear weapons, right? A lot of people said, "Oh, we don't need guns and all that." We don't need nuclear weapons either. Because the moment a nuclear war happens, we're screwed. But you know why we have nuclear weapons? Just in case all the other countries, keeping them at bay, so they don't try something against us. That is why we have nuclear weapons. We have it to challenge them. And that is why people have guns. People have guns not because they love guns, or some people do. Some people do. I'll keep it a buck. Some people do. But we have guns to protect us from the people who won't be stopped. The criminals who don't care about the law. You think those guys care that if we have a gun or not? No, they'll try to do something. But we need a means to protect ourselves. Whether it's from some random criminal who'll get a gun illegally or try to come kidnap your house, or a lot of different situations. whether it's the government trying to enforce injustices on us as a people, whether it's another country who wants to invade America and try to land on our land and think everything is cool, whether it's some weirdo who decides to come and shoot up people because he knows that people are unarmed. Regardless, it is there for a reason. Now, one thing I will kind of iterate here for you guys here is I'm not saying that what we're doing now is working. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not an expert on this. I just did some research and really came up with the thoughts on the fly. But I do want to keep in mind that there's definitely some things we can do to help the situations. Something to help the fact that children are the leading cause of deaths in children is firearms. It's not due to mass shootings, but it is due to firearms in general. So we need to fix that. We need to fix the culture that is making that happen. In a lot of these unfortunate communities where violence is rampant, we need to fix that culture. We need to fix the mental health issues that are going on. Either put these guys away if they don't get help, or get them help so they can fix themselves. Even the ways to make sure that these people who possess guns, even dwindling the number of people who have the guns legally and doing crimes, even limiting that a little bit. Someone brought an example, similar to like a driver's license. You do your permit test and then you do your driver's test. I don't see a reason why there can't be like a quick test for like gun situations. But the only reason why I push back even me saying that is because of my realization that if the guy doesn't want to do a test to get his gun, he'll just get it somewhere else. So it really doesn't help putting more checks on guns. It won't help. As a matter of fact, it'll be harder to keep track of the guns because they'll just get it illegally, which is worse. You'd rather have someone have the gun legally because you can track their information better. In reality, you'd rather the gun be bought legally. You can track the records of the gun. You can track the number on the gun. If it's illegal, you won't be able to track the person. So in reality, the smarter solution is people buying more guns versus buying illegal guns. Now, the idea for raising the age of being able to buy a gun is interesting. I mean, you can't drink alcohol until you're 21 years old, right? Yeah, people aren't considered like an adult really until like 18. You can't drive until you're 16. So there is age limits. Right now it's 18. So, 18 is like the adult age. So it's like, I think personally, universally, anybody below 18 shouldn't have a gun because anybody below 18 is not responsible enough to have a gun. And if they commit a crime under the age of 18, then they'll be considered a minor. So I think at the very least I can agree with that. It's really hard to find proper solutions because if you present a solution and you look at the facts, does that really work? We have to be realistic about the solutions we're possessing. Taking people's guns away won't work. More tests won't work. So taking away assault weapons won't work. I read off the statistics. Only 3% of homicides is assault weapons. So that taking away assault weapons does literally nothing in terms of the percentage. Most of the deaths are handguns, right? And even if you take away assault weapons, they'll get it illegally and still mass shooting will still happen. So people need to realize that things are much more complicated than it seems, and that's what this podcast episode was about. And I think I'm dropping these in the 3-segment video, so if you guys are watching, hope you guys did enjoy this episode of The Trend. Daily content on the channel, weekly content on the podcast. If you enjoyed the channel or the video, make sure you guys like and subscribe. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you guys rate me 5 stars. Eventually, I want to start having guests on, of course, and having deep conversations about different things. But I think it was necessary for me to talk about mass shootings and gun laws and how guns are used in America and the world because of all the constant social media news. And I think that was important. Personally, I think it was important for people to get the right information. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care and peace.